Ex-teachers, professors of Reddit, what was your duck this moment? End of year assessing students to see who'd progress through to the second year. While assessing the work, the department head came in and said we had to fail X amount due to facilities and resources for the next year. He then returned an hour later and said that due to the budget we actually needed to pass a higher number than originally thought. I completely ignored what he'd said and carried on marking on merit, but it was the proverbial straw. Edit. This was a UK university a few years ago. The system has been really messed up in recent years. I failed a college student who never came to class and missed both the midterm and final exams. The influential parents complained to the school. The administration later went into the digital records and changed the fail to a passing grade without my knowledge. I found it out later. Third hand. Ergo, I refused to sign a second year contract they offered to me. The principal's niece made a B in my freshman geography class and she wanted me to bump it to an A. Because the child could not get into Texas A&M with a B in a freshman class on her record. This school also pressured teachers to fail no students. I had a student that copied off another kid during a test. I gave him a 0%. The parents came in to complain to administration that since I hadn't explicitly said during the first day orientation that cheating wasn't allowed, it was an unfair punishment. Administration forced me to allow him an opportunity to retake the test. He never retook the test, and the grade of 0 stood. Still, I was so disillusioned by the entire experience that I started looking the next day at college programs that I could use to transition away from public education. I was a high school teacher with 7 years experience in my district and a master's degree. I was making $49,000. This was 2013. I was talking to a friend who was in from out of town. This friend had barely made it through his bachelor's degree, even with a lot of help from them and other friends. Over dinner he was complaining about not getting a good enough raise. So he was only making $143,000 at his software consulting job. He didn't do the technical stuff. More customer relations. I left teaching to make more money. I am. But it has taken a while. And I really miss working with the kids. Wish I had stayed in teaching. Edit. To be clear, I don't begrudge my friend a penny. Good for people who do well. Edit. A letter. Parents yelling at me for accusing their little prince of acting out and getting 0 support from administration. Kid poured gasoline under the door of my room after hours and lit it, burning most of the room. The facility guys worked all weekend to clean it up and paint it, hauling in new desks to replace those burned. Not long after that, I found out I could make more money with less hassle by waiting tables at the beach. Plus the beach has women in bikinis. Full stop. I was gone a week later. 2 weeks into my first year teaching 9th grade math, I had a girl attack another girl for no reason in my class. She was grabbing onto her hair really tightly and I was trying to break it up. Another student tried to help me out and somehow the instigating student managed to punch him in the face and give him a bloody nose while still holding on to the other student's hair. Now what makes this story relevant is I literally said the words "duck this" while trying to break up the fight. Not loud. Not to a student. But just like "duck this, I'm not gonna let this happen in my class right now." Well, the instigating student decided to tell the principal that I was cursing at her. Despite the other students in the class supporting me and the fact that this student had a history of violence. I got a letter in my permanent file saying I had used inappropriate language towards a student. Duck that. Teaching taught me a lot, but I couldn't do it for more than a couple years. Really respect those that make it their career. Going through my duck this moment right now. Been in special education since 2007. District I work in desperately wants teachers to start new classrooms due to overcrowding, yet they don't want to hire the right people. They'd rather hire fellow locals from high school and the area who the admins know versus hiring qualified people from the outside. Our special education admin has 0 spec ed experience and his replacement also has no spec ed experience. Not fun at all. I had a religion teacher in high school named Mr. Nguyen, who was working on becoming a Jesuit priest and was a really cool guy. There was a kid in my class who was an annoying smartass, but Mr. Nguyen was always really patient with him. Until one day he pushed him too far. I forgot exactly what the kid said, but it definitely crossed the line. Mr. Nguyen slammed his fists on his desk and shouted, "Why can't you ever shut the duck up?" He then picked up his stapler and chucked it at the kid, missing his head by a few inches and leaving a huge dent in the wall, and then stormed out into the hallway. There was another religion teacher down the hall who heard the commotion and talked to Mr. Nguyen in the hall for a while to calm him down. He didn't give up on teaching, but it was a pretty extreme duck this moment I witnessed. Mine wasn't so much a bad duck this moment. I used to teach developmentally delayed kids and it was awesome. The one moment that sticks out the most was when we were doing a lesson on dinosaurs. I don't remember exactly what it was about, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, the kids were having a blast pretending to be dinosaurs, so we just said duck the lesson and had dinosaur day. Pretty much the whole day was spent acting like dinosaurs and doing dinosaur-y things. That sounds like fun. It's not for me though. My mom retired as a special education teacher after a student bit her hard enough to draw blood. She had to get a ton of tests for everything from hepatitis to freaking rabies. She was fine, thankfully, but that was when she decided that she'd had enough. She went on to sub for non-special ed kids and eventually to do administrative work at a charity for ASD individuals. So I was a TA for a college course, Introduction to Information Assurance. One of the labs for the class involved performing a SQL injection. If you don't know what that means, just know that you have to build your input string carefully. The attack required a very specific input. Well, this one student was getting frustrated and asked for some help. After looking at his input string, I realized he had it just right. Except he was missing a terminator on part of the input, semicolons. Am I right? I pointed out the simple mistake and he didn't take it well. He smashed his own face on the keyboard, logged off the machine, thanked me, and left the class. I knew this level of teaching wasn't for me. I don't know what he's been up to, but I can't imagine a coworker responding to bugs like that. Was substituting at a low-income middle school for the day. About 40 students per class. Just had a simple worksheet for them to work on every hour rotation. Spent the day breaking up fist fights. Chairs or desks being thrown across the room. Students having screaming matches. Students climbing and dancing on desks. Students just leaving class during the chaos. I had 6 students turn in the completed worksheet for an entire day of class rotations. I realized I was no longer a teacher but a prison guard with less benefits and no way to defend myself. I guarantee 80% of these kids will end up dead or in prison before the age of 25. Never again. When the principal told me one of my students' mother was getting her secondary education certification so she could move up to teach HS Math, where her son was, so they wouldn't be renewing my contract to teach the following year, but they were in need of a network administrator for the school district, and they were willing to pay me a teacher's $25,000 salary to do it, and I would be answering to each building principal, like a janitor. Not to the superintendent. Like a district level admin. Told this story 100 times already, but it was the time I was breaking up a fight between a 12-year-old boy and girl, and the boy turned around and punched me in the nuts as hard as he could. The school administrators did nothing. His mom was in the room with him. She did nothing. The general feeling was, this kid's mom pays tuition. Deal with it. I dealt with it by leaving the school, opening my own private school, and taking half the students with me. When the prestigious high school I was working at focused on sports more than academics. On top of that, it turned out that the principal overrode teachers' marks if they tried giving students a failing grade. Duck that. I have too. Early in my career, I had students who were plagiarizing lab reports. I turned them in. Mostly because I felt I had to. The school made a huge ducking deal about cheating and had an academic honesty pledge statement students wrote on every test. One set of parents screamed at me over the phone. Next thing I know, I had a meeting with the vice principal who said they didn't want the cheating to interfere with the student's future, and he ripped up all the plagiarism reports I wrote that year. My second time saying duck this was based on the cumulative effects of being unsupported by the school. They changed which courses I was teaching and the grade level. We had a construction project going on, so there was constant noise, including beeping and drilling. Even when they promised it wouldn't be during the school day, that was a lie. Stupid school-wide initiatives. More pointless meetings. Incompetent high-ups. It's the adults in the system that make it hard to be a teacher. The kids are generally not the problem. Not sure if this qualifies, but I was an English teacher in China. I taught kindergarten, and the little emperor syndrome really is a thing. The little boys in the class were total sheets, and the regular classroom teachers gave exactly 0 ducks in restraining them, though I saw a little girl get slapped for acting up. My breaking point was when I was in front of the class teaching and one little boy was running around in a circle right in front of me. I was ignoring him, but then he started slapping me really hard in the legs every time he went past me. On about the 6th circle, he wound up his arm to slap me and I just nailed him. Full on two-handed shove. The kid went flying, skidded across the floor looking pretty stunned, though didn't cry. Then the teachers took it upon themselves to come over and give him shit, make him apologize and sit back down. At that point I figured I'm literally assaulting 6-year-olds. Probably best that I get out of this country. I left with 3 months still on my contract. No regrets. I was an adjunct at the bottom of the totem pole and got my class assignments last and only if the more senior people, everyone, had gotten their minimum number of classes. They'd hold off on this until the literal last minute, and I'd find out if I was teaching 3 days before the semester started. For the last 2 or 3 years, I was only teaching online and only in the summer. During that time I moved away and started a business, so it was all fine with me. The last summer, I got 2 classes I'd never taught before with about a month before they started. I had to learn a totally new subject for one, and remember stuff I hadn't looked at since grad school for the other. They almost took 1 class away from me after I'd busted my ass to prepare for it, because nobody else's classes were filling up. The other class had 6 people in it. I was told I could teach it prorated for 6/11 THS of the usual rate, and I refused. I didn't have time to learn that stuff, teach 2 classes, and keep my business going. My wife got contacted about applying for a job out of state. I encouraged her to do so. My thoughts were I have a 1.5 years of teaching experience and a master's degree in teaching from an R1 research institution. This will be easy. It was not easy. I was told I could not teach in the subject that I was fully certified and held a degree in my current state, despite reading stories about shortages and emergency certifications in my field. But I could probably make it work in another field if I took 6-7 classes. I now work another job that I don't really like, though I can get those 6-7 classes for mostly free if I want them. The problem is starting over as a teacher again would be a decent sized pay cut, and trying to convince myself to deal with the overall low societal respect for teachers is tough when the whole process has just exacerbated my depression for 3 years. When I found kids labeled proficient were actually 1, 2, or 3 years behind. Advanced included average kids. Parents are not told the truth about student performance levels. This, in a US premier school system. That's because everybody is brilliant and everybody gets a trophy. Little Billy It for brains has to feel good constantly because emotion is all that matters. And God forbid you have to fail him and then have to deal with Mr. and MRS. It for brains who will do nothing but blame you for their kid's performance. A girl hopped on my computer and erased the attendance for the day for whatever reason. When I wrote her a referral, she started stalking me around the room, crazy-eyed. making fists, ready to punch me. Even the other students in the class were scared she was about to jump me. I called security. Found out later that the girl, who was quite large and could probably cause some serious damage, was on heroin and other drugs. Administration didn't think that I needed to know. I had a senior finish the semester with a 40-something average and about 60% attendance. He was going to fail his senior year. On the day I was to submit grades, administration came to me with a student and asked what he can do to pass. I said take the class again. Well, that was the wrong answer apparently. I was forced to give him a few makeup assignments and a 70 to pass. He was such a troublemaker they just wanted him out. Found out 3 other teachers had similar experiences with this student. I realized I hated 99% of my co-workers and disagreed with virtually every new initiative we were supposed to implement. Liked my time in the classroom with the students. But there's a lot more to teaching than that. Every term I have that moment just before finals. Up to about 5 students per term will come into my office and act all surprised that they're failing my class. They tell me they are graduating this term and I have to let them make up all the work they missed. I tell them no. Then they freak out. But I need to graduate. I have a job lined up and everything. Then in was a bold ducking move to miss half of the assignments. Hardly come to class. And never ask for help despite failing every test. My mom used to be an English teacher. One of her co-workers caught a couple of teens smoking in the bathroom. They beat up the teacher. He quit and my mom decided to resign at the end of the year. The teacher that was beaten up is fine. He's a florist now. He provided the flowers for my wedding.